doing and how Esri is doing in these times.
Well, I'm doing well, thanks. And Esri is doing quite well. As you know, with the pandemic, everybody in the around the world, about March 13th, I think it was in 2020, where we went from an office to working at home. And, being a technology company did make it quite a bit easier, but we did have a big shift in our priorities. We moved from building solutions for all kinds of industries to focusing on the pandemic and focusing on the coronavirus. And you've probably seen the Johns Hopkins coronavirus dashboard, which is that's a GIS dashboard, Esri GIS dashboard, and it has over 2 trillion views now. So it's appropriate here to be talking with FIG, and we may have the most viewed map in world history.
Yeah, I guess many have clicked on it once a day at least during this past year.
For a long time, it consumed all of our attention. And it's amazing, those dashboards. They convey so much information so quickly. You can see the location, you can see the rate of the spread, you can see the infections, the hospital capacity, and unfortunately, the illness and death also.
So yeah, now when we have the working week audience here, talking about more into the future. So how do you see these opportunities that you have gained throughout this past year?
Well, one thing that's happening with GIS is there is a lot of innovation taking place in GIS itself, but we also take advantage of all kinds of other innovations, whether it's artificial intelligence for extracting information from imagery, whether it's different kinds of mapping techniques, whether it's collecting high accuracy information in the field, managing multiple datums, things like that. We take a lot of those other innovations and incorporate them into this. It's more than a platform now. It's more of a required infrastructure in business and in government now, of how data and technology and all of these come together for use. And it's not like you have to be an expert to use this technology anymore. And again, the dashboard shows that well. These can be configured for all types of users. And what information do you want to know? What questions do you want answered? How do you configure some technology? And that's actually another real big thing that's going on right now is we're building tools to be configured, and it's in the cyber environment we're in. It's really the only way to build secure software is to have core modern technology be configured for your use, and it makes it sustainable as well. You can stay current. And again, in this security environment, you have to keep your software current.
So when you talk about location intelligence, you really mean it, that it's easy to use, it's for everyone. Because I think that's one of the very interesting things about Esri, using this location intelligence wherever you are.
And it's the location intelligence, but it's also leveraging all of your data assets. It's been quoted many times that 85% of all data has a spatial location component. Well, if you're not using that in your decision-making process, in your planning, in your execution, then you're not using a large portion of your probably expensive, very valuable data asset.
Yeah, well, as part of this e-working week, you've also been organizing a workshop that will take place Thursday on the GIS parcel fabric. So what are the ideas behind this workshop?
Well, the parcel fabric has, I don't know how many man years. It's probably close to 100 man years of our investment into really cracking the efficiency, the data integrity, managing history, all the components of a cadastral system encompassed in this in this parcel fabric. And we want to, in the workshop, we want to show that it's easy to use, it's easy to get started, and you can get started with almost any digital data. And it's also highly configurable. There are legal constraints across the world in different kinds of cadastral systems, and we've worked incredibly hard to make it flexible to be able to work with any legal system and configure the workflows, the tasks for how each individual country or state does things. So we just want to try to get the word out on that. It's been a major investment for us, but it's going to reap benefits around the world for all cadastral agencies.
Well, Brent, I think that's going to be really fun and interesting. And Brent, it was really nice to meet you here almost in person, not the same as seeing you at a real working week, but we hope that we can get back to this very soon.
We hope next time for sure.
Yeah, and do you have a final remark to our working week viewers?
Well, I'd just like to, to ask everyone, take advantage of all the opportunities that FIG has available. There are a lot of sessions. There's a lot of content here. There's a lot to be learned. And we have to work a little bit harder now to share with each other in this online environment, but make the effort to share and to learn, and it'll be well worth your while.
Well, thanks a lot, Brent, and thanks to Esri, and see you soon around.
All right. Thanks, Louise.
Do you ever consider the term space? The scope of the word? And all the forms it can take? Space is everywhere, but it isn't infinite. This means we must use our space wisely, the way it's organized, the agreements involved, so you know where the boundary lies between you and your neighbor. That your house and the land it stands on is actually yours. That pipelines, bus stops, schools and offices are all in their rightful place. And that the rights related to every square centimetre are clear in the Netherlands, the Dutch Caribbean, and elsewhere. This is the everyday role of Cadastre. As an independent party, we are involved in everything on and beneath the ground. Property registration is poorly organized in 70% of the world. Millions of people live without an address or the right documents to prove ownership. Cadastre helps these countries with advice, information, and education. In addition, we register an infinite amount of geodata. Combining this data, we can find answers to societal questions, such as, where's the best place for a new motorway? What's the situation with unoccupied shops? Is a neighborhood population aging? Geodata is of great value to society and can be used by everyone. That's why Cadastre offers this data via a single geodata portal, making it accessible to all of us, creating transparency about who owns what, facilitating choices about real estate and space, to allow a country to grow, develop, and have the security it needs to build the future. With 2,000 employees and our partners, we contribute to this goal every day. Cadastre, rightfully yours.
Welcome everyone back to the studio here. I hope you have enjoyed some very nice sessions and that you are now very familiar with the hop-in system and that you have been around and you have perhaps already tried the networking key. If you've not done that, you have to do this later tonight and meet with some of your fellow viewers here. But I'm glad to welcome you back here in the studio. We're going to have the second keynote session right now. And next to me, I have Rudolf Staiger. I think no introduction is needed anymore for him. Rudolf is the president of FIG, and it's a joy to give over the word to him for this session. That is together with Jack Dangermond from Esri. Welcome to you, Rudolf, and welcome. And
thank you, Louise. Thank you for these nice words of introduction. Dear colleagues and friends all over the world, good morning, good day, good afternoon, good evening, maybe even good night. It's a pleasure that you join us for this second keynote. And it's a very big pleasure and honor that Jack Dangermond has accepted our invitation, being part of this first electronic FIG working week. For those who do not know Jack Dangermond, he is the founder, owner, and chief executive officer of Esri. Esri, a worldwide known company in this business, and Esri is an acronym and stands for Environmental Systems Research Institute. And he founded this company in 1969. And he's in this business still then. And if you look at the company, it was growing all the time. Congratulations to this. So over the next 60 minutes, we would like to have a discussion between Jack and myself. And first of all, Jack, very warm welcome. From our side, we know at this time of the year you are very busy preparing the Esri user conference, and therefore we appreciate very much that you are here with us. Jack.
My great pleasure. Thank you. It's this audience is a very special audience, Rudolf, as you know. I think you're building the foundations of knowledge to run the world, and the evidence is clear. Those people who really know it and understand it. So I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you very much for actually asking me to participate in this session.
It's a pleasure. The last 15 months have been difficult for us all over the world. Yeah. How did Esri respond to COVID-19? I mean, Esri is a huge company, and I'm sure it was not easy. It was probably complicated. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Well, we were very fortunate because being a technology company, we were able to pivot rather quickly to going to virtual work from home kind of operations. It took us about 1 week, and I suspect this happened in all of the organizations that are listening here around the world. It was difficult, but we just moved. We made a decision, and within 1 week, our 5,000 employees here in the US and the 6,000 overseas were able to move to work from home. It wasn't perfect, but we were able to stay on our mission of serving our users. That was very important. We got clear on that as a group and just kept pushing it. And actually, it turns out that we were able to have business continuity. We didn't really miss a beat and continued to actually grow even in these difficult times. I think each of us responded differently. We did different things, but from our side, things remained healthy and continuing to be healthy today.
I mean, you are a hands-on, face-to-face kind of guy, and how was it for you personally?
Well, just like it is for everybody here that's listening, it was challenging. In my case, we decided to significantly invest in solutions that might help people respond effectively, our users effectively respond to the COVID situation. And I'll share a few slides in a few minutes about it, but we basically went into a methodology of making templates that help people organize measurements of cases, and then take those cases and put them onto maps and show the world what was going on. And that happened at many different scales. It happened at the global scale with our user, the Johns Hopkins University, who set up a website, believe it or not, that has been looked at several trillion times. Many of you have probably seen the Hopkins map. The work that went on there took only about a week to really configure and then bring up to scale. And billions of people, actually more than half of the world's population, looked at that map and was able to see what was going on. So the template that we built for that we then began to share and make available freely to our users, but also all of the ministries of health around the world. And that, frankly, Rudolf, it really made a difference. People could see and get more engaged and understand. And especially this particular audience, building understanding, building the information, and then getting it out to people will understand exactly what I'm saying here. It opened the world's eyes to see the world differently. They understood that we're interrelated. They understood things.
Okay.
Well, you asked a very pointed question. How did I react personally? I frankly don't think I've ever worked as hard as I did over those, especially first 6 months until the pattern was really working. And we played with all kinds of ways to look at the disease and its spread, contact tracing, working back, looking at pollution in sewer lines to try to get some kind of a handle or some kind of an index about how we could get our hands around this problem. Should it be quarantined? Should we? How can we message with different devices and survey instruments, the different nursing homes and most vulnerable populations? Where could we locate, testing sites? Where could we locate vaccine vaccine locations? Okay. So it was all 7x24 operation here, supporting our users doing amazing work.
Okay.
So that's, you asked me a personal question.
Yeah,
It was overwhelming, frankly.
Yeah, okay. So you should be, with this famous map, you should be in the Guinness Book of Records. The most seen map in the world with this 200 trillion times it was clicked on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was an amazing experience.
Yeah. If we exclude this COVID for some seconds, what are the big technology trends? What's going on in GIS, and particularly what's relevant for national mapping agencies and surveying organizations?
Well, I thought maybe, if you don't mind, I'd like to share a few slides about what GIS is really all about.
Sure.
Because a lot of people have different stories about it, they have different pictures about it, and particularly in national mapping agencies. But it is a kind of digital twin of our world, and both on the cadastral side and on the base map side, the national agencies play a vital role in being able to measure and manage geographic data about our planet at all different scales. Mm-hmm. And then they visualize it, and then they support people doing analytics with it. They also support people doing land use planning and design, making various kinds of actions, all the way up to the highest levels of government, and then taking those to action. So an information system about geography is a process as well as the basic technology. And I always like this phrase of it's about creating and applying geographic knowledge widely. And the systems that are built, the technology systems, are systems of record keeping, like the cadastral record or features about geography. They are systems of analysis, where we're really looking at relationships and patterns, trying to understand, like we did with COVID. And then there are systems of engagement. And that's really where, for example, the Johns Hopkins map was so very important, because it engaged people. It helped them understand the fundamental science and data records that are going on. And national mapping agencies and cadastral agencies really have parts of all three of these systems going on. And it's important to realize that because they're interconnected and they serve different aspects of society. Specifically, in the cadastral area, it's not just measuring the boundaries, although that's fundamental and important. It's also about being able to leverage that information in various ways for engaging stories, and whether they're 3D systems of record showing the work that's going on, or showing parcel history, or showing cadastre as it relates to the forestry or taxable property. All of this is what, well, it's really what this conference is about in many ways. And it's also important to stay connected as you do your work. And here I'm talking to all of you, that this provides not only a foundation for the civil society, but also a foundation for planning and creating the future and creating a more sustainable future. And it's also a foundation with topographic data and charting in many of your agencies that again support just a whole wealth of different sorts of applications. And as you know, I mean, remote sensing, we used to think of it, oh, it's Landsat or something as kind of a general picture. No, I mean, remote sensing is blossomed out so that we can look at virtually everything that's going on, all things that are changing and moving on the planet. And not real time, but getting there with full motion video integration. This is really important. I just want to say that all of this has to do with geographic information systems and their development. But yeah, so long answer to where I think GIS is and where it's, well, you might ask where is it going? That's a different sort of a question, but I wanted to ground everybody in understanding what they are doing. And around the world, the users are applying this in their various countries for great gain.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you. So what do you see having the greatest impact in the near future?
That's also a very big question. And I have some slides about it. Ladies and gentlemen who are listening, you might know that we sort of rehearsed some questions, so this isn't exactly ad hoc. But in preparation for this talk, I'll just simply say that there are many technologies that are affecting GIS technology. It's big data, machine learning, advanced analytics, cloud computing, the creation of apps that connect to everyone, this geographic data. And all of these trends are integrating and focusing on transforming the basic mission of mapping organizations around the world. And I'll cover a few of these, but before I do that, I'll simply say the patterns of GIS in the past have been just a desktop or just an enterprise server, but now it's emerging to also include apps that run off of the enterprise servers, embedded applications that are all the way from embedded inside of cars like the Uber people do to connecting to field people that are collecting data. And all of these patterns, frankly, listen, this is an important point. All of these patterns are becoming interconnected with web services. And they're creating a new pattern. And this should speak to all of this audience. This new pattern is the geospatial infrastructure pattern. And while for the last 3 decades we've talked about SDI, spatial data infrastructure, and that national mapping agencies particularly, but at all different scales of government, should play a role in that. Well, technically these things are all getting interconnected, and they are creating this infrastructure, not by some grand design, but it's just sort of falling into place. So we have this going on in major organizations like the US Geospatial Intelligence Agency, NGA. We have it in national organizations in the UK, in Ireland, in Holland, in Asia Pacific, all over the world. They're just sort of interconnecting their systems through portals. And that's a new pattern. And it's a pattern where you've got all this infrastructure. It's kind of like a central data bank, except that it's not a central data bank. It's a distributed system of lots of other services. People are being open. They're saying, I'll share my base maps, I'll share my forestry data, I'll share my water data, I'll share my climate data, I'll share my land use data, I'll share my urban data, I'll share my utility data. And those data services are being connected through a portal, which is kind of an open portal that allows people to not only discover, but also unify these layers to support different kinds of efforts. that's a change, actually. And it needs to be thought about very carefully with respect to organizations, because if we look at a country, it means I can bring in not just maps, but also imagery data or LiDAR data or big data or real-time IoT data. I can bring those into this environment and dynamically integrate them, almost as if they're in one big data bank, and then turn around and make them useful in different kinds of applications. And bringing them in isn't just one feature type, like a base map or an image. It's bringing in whole models, like a BIM model into the GIS, or a network model from a utility, or a whole city model, a SIM, sometimes it's referred to, or landscape models with all the thematics that are associated with it. We can bring these data sets together, Rudolf, and unify them dynamically. And in a way, nobody has to be totally in charge, yet somebody has to be in charge to set up the portal that references these amazing digital, the growth in, amazing digital growth in content, and then make them available through portals. And here again, the big trend that I see is that this infrastructure is opening up, like the Corona map that I shared here. I'll just use that as an icon through the discussion. It's opening up the world's eyes to not just COVID, but climate change or loss of biodiversity or land use change or demographic information, basically connecting the public with the scientific and information creation activities of national mapping agencies around the world. They let people tell stories. And also, this data is showing up in apps. Like our users now have made over 2 million web apps that are accessing services. I don't know how many billions of people they reach, but also same thing is happening with devices, little native device apps that can collect data and can inform citizens of what's going on. So this role of, creating the infrastructure, not really all of its pieces, but integrating the infrastructure and then making it available is important. And another thing that's happening among different agencies is they're starting to share information as services and creating new partnerships. Up in the upper left is one that I'll mention. It's Pacific Gas and Electric. That's the largest utility here we have in the United States. It's in California. And they have opened up their networks to be able to be used by the state because of the wildfires. So the utility company is serving the state, and the state is tracking the wildfires and serving back to the utilities. Content. And that's creating better workflows and collaboration. Similarly, in regional planning, in York, Canada, there's an organization there that's been set up for just organizing all the infrastructure and making it available to all the other agencies. This is changing things. So another big pattern, and I'm going kind of down a list here because you asked me, is that the infrastructure is increasingly going to cloud. That means people are putting their own software and data in their own clouds, and they're also putting it into public clouds, and sometimes a hybrid combination. I'll put my data, my imagery data in this cloud, I'll put my vector data in that cloud, and I can then serve it and massively scale out. So I myself are no longer requiring to make these huge capital investments. And this again came alive in the COVID environment, which I think is kind of an indication of the future, kind of massive surge that occurred, so I can scale up and then scale down during different times of emergencies. Another dimension that's occurring in the infrastructure is real-time data. People are beginning to connect IoT or real-time, like buses or water flows or airplane flows or noise, different sensors in the cities. They're connecting those real-time things in the cloud to be able to enrich, the layers of a GIS for different applications. And that's an area, again, where national agencies don't have to do all the IoT collection, but they can just reference these new generations of services that can be brought in. Also imagery, being able to store imagery in the cloud as a SaaS service so that I don't have to buy all the hardware to store imagery and serve it. I can just, rent it, so to speak. That's a big deal. Another one is the integration of what I call GeoAI. It's really AI, machine learning, and deep learning with these massive imagery sets. There is a huge community of open source software that is really pushing the envelope on data science and image analytics, doing feature extraction, object classification, and so on, and connecting GIS to those environments and then bringing that knowledge in to be able to enrich what national mapping agencies are doing is very powerful. Not only feature collection or extraction, but also being able just to tell the world, hey, it's changing over here. We're losing our forests over here. We're flooding over here. And as that set of models continues to grow, it means we will be more and more relevant, or your agencies will be. There are other developments occurring specifically in the parcel area. A new generation of data models are emerging, which are services-based. This really means I can take parcels, not just a small file of them, but I can scale them way out, and I can integrate the physical and the legal information about parcels together. Wow, that's been such, as you know, that has been such a problem for years. How do we get the surveyors and the mappers together along with the sort of legal, physical people? So this seems to be working. There's hundreds of organizations who've implemented this new model, and it really is really creating dramatic impact on cadastral agencies. Not everywhere yet. I would just say it's in its early days. I have this great treasure of being old. That's the way I describe it. It's not the way my wife describes it, but anyway, there's a certain kind of a blessing for knowing history, and many of our listeners here have wrestled with this problem of how do we really create an integrated parcel fabric information system. And this is one where we've had different agencies, organizations, partnerships over the years try to figure it out. I think we actually have finally figured this out, and that's going to have an impact on our business, all of our collective business. Another big trend that I'm seeing is something called reality capture. And this allows us to take imagery and LiDAR points and orientation data and do basically digital photogrammetry, set up a pipeline that brings this information together and creates GIS ready or ready products like true orthos dynamically, and big point clouds and surface models and textured meshes. Textured meshes for me are one of my favorite new best friends. They're really exciting. I'll see if I can do a little quick demo of this. This is Frankfurt. This is a textured mesh that was, I like to think of it as like a 3D picture, but it's much richer than that. It's a whole, as I move this model around, you can see that it's actually been integrated with a vector data set. So I can actually zoom out and characterize different buildings here with the actual vector information. So the meshing, the bringing together of meshes and vector information, I think is, is a whole new generation of the way we'll organize GISs. That's for sure. Well, another big innovation is integrating the field into GISs. So this has been made available through a variety of these apps, field apps, we might say. and connecting them with Office apps. So I can connect every field crew to collect information now, and our partners like Trimble and Leica and others US are integrating with these in-field data collection devices and being able to put information into the cloud, and at the very same time they're putting it in, other people can be editing it, merging it, and integrating it into a system. This was very helpful in COVID, for example, because we were measuring the case volumes in different nursing homes or in different hospitals, and at the very same time we were seeing them on a dashboard for local government. We did the same thing with census in the Philippines, in the US here, in other countries. They're actually doing the census with field survey 1 through 1, 2, 3 instruments, collecting it, and people are tracking how the census is going. This is very valuable for census work. So people are all getting connected to a dynamic GIS where we can report, track people, and then do our work not only faster, but also adjust surveys as they are moving along. And working with the Dutch cadastre, for example, in Colombia, we were able to configure these tools so that we could actually have fit-for-purpose land administration. I know this is something that FIG has really driven as an organization to be able to develop for developing countries. So collecting in the field, adjusting in the field, cadastral information in such a way that we can be appropriate for the right locations and the right domains. The last thing I really want to talk about technically is an innovation that we're working on with Autodesk Corporation. This is really integrating their BIM models, which are now in the cloud, with GIS models in the cloud or in on-prem environments. So we're calling this GeoBIM. And what it does is dynamically, that little green box is supposed to represent the dynamic relationship between geographic features and graphic features that are created in these BIM sort of models. And the dynamic integration of those two different kinds of data sets means that we can create new applications, kind of a whole new application suite on the connected data sets. So as we build a living twin, a living digital twin of cities, the integration of project information that's coming in through BIMs with geographic systematic information that most of our listeners work with, and making that a new kind of application for both engineers but also for long-term management excites me. I don't know exactly where all of the applications will be on this, but it's one of the big ones for me. Well, that was a kind of a preview. I talked too much. This was supposed to be interactive, but anyway.
You do not talk too much. It's really fascinating listening to you, and I'm pretty sure everybody feels the knowledge and the passion which is accompanying you since 50 years. But just let me allow you a spontaneous question. You are in this
Sure.
business since 50 years. And you
Yeah.
started the business 50 years ago. You had a vision. You adjusted this vision after 5 years. You adjusted it again after 5 years, and so on and so on. So what
Right.
was maybe the biggest surprise for you in a positive sense? Was the biggest deception, or were your predictions going well, or you were too pessimistic or too optimistic? Maybe you can give us an idea of your personal travel over these 50 years. And meanwhile, while you are thinking about it, I would just like talk to our listeners, because we have planned also a Q&A session. So please, all over the world, you have the rare occasion to talk to so much passion and so much knowledge about GIS. Please send in your questions. We have a certain delay in our technical system. We need some time to prepare them. So please send your questions now. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Well, that's good. I don't know exactly how to answer your question. It's very provocative, actually.
But maybe you have just a spontaneous things flipping up.
I have to say that I fell in love with what I do when I was at university in a research lab. And it was like, I remember it was in November in 1968. I was working, and it sort of like all came together. I could bring technology, I could bring the science of geography and surveying and mapping together with the idea that we could actually make a difference with this in creating a better world. And I don't know how old you are really, Rudolf. You probably were too young for this, but at that particular time in the 60s, there was a revolution going on. There was the birthing of the environmental movement. There was the Vietnam War time periods, which caused us all to rethink what we were doing as a society around the world, really. And in the universities were very sort of like today in a way, rethinking everything. Then I was as a stupid student, you know, and all of a sudden I said, wow, this could actually be a career that I could do. And I didn't have any idea of what would actually happen, but it was an inspirational moment. And for the younger people in the audience, I always like to talk about watch out for those inspirational moments, because they can really set your career and set your life in motion. And for me, it was so motivating, I could hardly sleep. For days, I couldn't. And I worked all night, worked all day, kind of like I do right now. Nothing ever changed. But I found something that I really loved. And I could see that it would matter. I could see that my life would actually matter. And I guess I didn't have the mental strength that I have today, or the history that I have today. But it really was exciting for me. So then starting Esri was an adventure. I mean, I just started doing little projects one at a time. And after years, about 10 years went by, people began to ask, they began to become curious about what are you doing? Can I actually do that? Can you share your software? And I sort of made a mistake or a good decision. I sold some of my software, which was not very well engineered, actually, at the time. And then the users would start to write me and call me and say, this stuff is junk. It's not really good. You don't do this and you don't do that. And of course, this was the time of the great quantitative revolution in biology, in science, and in mapping, and in cadastre. Everything was changing. We began to see that technology would actually play a role in our various professional activities. And it was hard as a young person to sort of buck that. But you know, in a way, it was being controversial with the biologists, being controversial with the surveying community, being controversial with the planners, and my own field, landscape planning and urban design. Nobody liked this idea of disruption coming in, but I just did little project at a time, demonstrating how it could really benefit. That led to our first user meeting, which I'm about to, again, hold for the 41st time. And that was an amazing event, because people told me all the junk that we had done. They criticized. And you have to be willing to open yourself up. And I think this is really good for all of you working in various government or private organizations. Open yourself up to criticism so that you can get better. And so that started in the early 80s with this rhythm of listening to users and then doing what they needed and wanted. Sometimes it isn't like listening too carefully, like do X, Y, Z, because they didn't actually know. We had to listen with a sense about what do they really want, and then engineer tools that would be responsive to their needs and wants. And so that started with mini computers, actually with mainframes, then to mini computers, then to workstations. And now many of the audience start to remember electronic workstations in the form of you know, these desktops. Then it went to desktops with Bill Gates's Windows. Then it went to servers. Then it went to the web. And now the logical evolution is it's moving from servers to connected servers organized by these portals that can provide access to all geographic knowledge.
Yeah.
So I spent the weekend reading a book that I'll share with you. It's really the history of Enehi. It was written by Palma, Mario Palma, who's now retired, but he goes through the fundamentals. I recommend all of you to get it, but he goes through the fundamentals of why Enehi was built in the first place. And it was to open and make available geographic information, statistical information, cadastral information, topographic information, so that the world would be less dangerous. It would be more sustainable. And his words were really touching me, and I guess I wanted to share them with this audience because for me, that's the great thrill in life, is that you can do something that really, advances the world's knowledge. And right now, particularly right now, we've gone through this episode of a year of COVID. And in the beginning, I was afraid, and then I just sort of fell back into my normal pattern of getting on with it, getting my hands around this problem and trying to figure out how we map the cases, how we project the cases, how it impacts hospitals, how we help people. That same kind of model. I've already talked about this. But what is coming, and particularly this is why I wanted to talk to all of you today, what's coming is these other waves of big human challenges. And it's going to test our strength as institutions. The challenge of loss of biodiversity, the great challenge of climate change. And here, geoscientists are going to be called upon to tell the truthful stories, to stand up against false news about climate change and about population and about issues of congestion in cities and issues about protecting nature and issues about setting up natural reserves. These are really, really important, Rudolf. And who better than the whole mapping, surveying community to tell these stories, to stand up for what we need to address, and then come up with creative solutions. It isn't just enough to, build the data sets, although that's foundational.
Yeah.
It's also important to be able to make that information relevant so that people can do geodesign, design with nature, to do geo-accounting, to account for all the factors, not just the money, the biology, the social factors, and then do geocommunication to tell stories about what's going on with things like story maps and so on. These are, so I was thrilled when you asked me to talk because
it's good. It's good.
I think there's a big thing coming on here.
Yeah, and it was correct when you said in the year 68 I was probably too young. Yes, I was too young. I was 12 years old. There was a revolution, I know, but I've learned it afterwards, but I was not part of it. And it was certainly an exciting time. But just allow me to take one of the first questions coming in, because I think they fit quite well to the topic we are right now.
Sure.
There's one question coming in. What advice do you have for a tech company starting today? Startup, as we call them.
Startups, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not probably the person to talk with about this. There's books written about this. What do you do? My history was that I never borrowed money. Mm-hmm. And I had no money. I had about $1,100, and I just started doing little projects. That's probably why it took so long to build us up into a company. And I still have that same practice today, is focus on what is really needed and wanted in the world. Lots of people can look good, come up with an idea, but I think startups should be grounded in something that really is purposeful. At least that's how I think of the world. And then do it where you don't set it up where your passion gets stolen by bankers or by venture capitalists or by people who just want to make money. Well, again, I'm uncomfortable saying it this way because I know there's lots of ways to create progress, and financially leveraged companies are one way to do it. I just chose not to do it. I think that allowed me to follow my passion rather than chase money, and it allowed me to do good by my customers rather than do good by my stockholders. So I don't know. That's not a big message. It's just a personal message that you don't hear probably very often. If you have the patience and you're not just about get rich quick, you can do amazing things if you just do steadily work along and do the right thing. And my colleagues feel exactly the same way. That's what makes it so exciting and makes Esri a cool company, actually.
Yeah. Thank you very much. There is another question I would like to take. Can you expand on the BIM GIS integration and what Esri is working on in this corner?
In the web GIS?
Well, BIM GIS, I think overall, maybe also web GIS, yes, of course, but the integration of BIM GIS.
BIM GIS, yes. Right, it was one of the things that I had mentioned in the slide was our work is to integrate BIM models right into the fabric of a GIS. And that started with Autodesk, of course, but also more recently we've embraced the open standards for bringing up open models. This was really pioneered in Europe particularly. And so now our desktops can read in open BIM models and standards-based BIM models, as well as the proprietary models of Revit with Autodesk Corporation. And in those desktops, we can visualize them. We can do spatial analysis on BIMs, and we can also use them as fabric in building a complete smart or digital city. On the other hand, BIM and also civil engineering CAD capabilities, we're again working with our partner Autodesk Corporation to allow their engineering tools to be able to bring in GIS data. So I can see the development of a bridge or the development of a building or the development of a campus in context, bring in the social information, bring in the natural information right into the designer's domain. I like to call this geodesign. So it's it's like two nouns kissing, geography and design. Geodesign. And that means I can bring geographic information into the design and construction and engineering and management process. And I love that idea.
So
those are the two sides of the integration picture that I see, because the world is changing. My God, they're going to build millions of buildings this year, and how do we create a more sustainable world? The buildings are often engineered and designed without context. How can we create a world that is sensitive to all the big issues, social and environmental issues, if we don't have them brought into the actual workflows of projects that people do? These are the transactions on the planet that are being made, and we need to get them spatially aware or geographically aware.
Thank you very much. Until now I learned a lot. Among what I've learned is your geo AI and your geodesign. This is very interesting, and there are coming provocative questions in. With so many advancements, how do you suggest government agencies get started? The provocation is towards, I think, the agencies, not towards you.
Well, agencies need to focus on their mission. So in modern civilization and society, thanks to the history of the of the German science world, we had specializations. We went in science, into ologies, geology, sociology, climatology, and so on. Yeah. Geography, in a way, is an integrator for all of those different specializations. Likewise, in government, we have the Department of Highways, we have the Department of Commerce, we have the Department of Security, and so on. And so this kind of specialization work is all about focusing on missions. And as a result of that kind of discipline, wow, we've been able to move much further. Yeah. Surveyors really know surveying, and we've been able to make huge advancements in the world because of the specialization. But we also need to be able to bring back the specializations into a more holistic approach for managing our planet. This is what's got us, in a way, in trouble, because people don't quite understand or collaborate to see the whole. Yeah. And this is really where the FIG community is so important, because they really provide the contextual framework, the way to integrate different sorts of activities. So you need to focus on your mission, that's your job. But I think at the same time, just like we all have learned computing at the same time we did our normal profession, at the same time, you need to understand the geographic dimension. So how to get started? Well, get some tools, get some training, or hire somebody that really knows that domain that can bring it in. That would be my quick answer.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's talk about COVID.
Okay.
Did COVID inspire you regarding the development of new products? Or did you change or introduce a new philosophy or priorities regarding developments, updates? Or were you just continuing as normal?
That's a very valuable question. What I did prepare is a series of slides that talked about the actual details of the work of COVID. Almost everybody, I suspect everybody in this audience has seen this map. This was an early shot of it before millions of people died, but it showed the trends and the progress of what was going on with disease outbreak and so on. And this was put together initially with a young man working at Johns Hopkins who just knew our dashboard technology, and he wired it together. He didn't realize that there would be 10, 15 billion hits on this map a day, nor did we, because we hosted it inside of ArcGIS Online, our SaaS infrastructure. So we learned lots of technical lessons about how to make things scale. And it also, like I said, opened the world's eyes to this phenomena at a global level. It made people realize that we were all interconnected. And so we began to develop a methodology here, Rudolf, that will look familiar to you because I showed similar sorts of things in other slides. But GIS teams actually stood up surveillance mapping like the dashboards, but then other people, epidemiologists, began to plan and get their hands around setting up strategies about everything from getting supplies to hospitals to attempting geographic quarantining, which worked quite successfully in some countries and not so in others. And then logistics and field operations for data collection. And then briefing management in whole new ways, and then involving the community, obviously, in doing it. So this has now become a kind of pattern by people like WHO and other health ministries, where they brought geography into their thinking in whole new ways. At the beginning, look, the health people digital health people just did not understand what we were doing and the value of georeferencing. It seems obvious to us to see where the diseases are, but that was not an easy thing to overcome. It took us months of negotiation and coaxing to get them to understand this. And again, I hit on this early on, that GIS is a framework for collecting measurements, and in this case, it's about cases and where there's facilities and measuring the demographics or bringing them in and looking at the vulnerable populations particularly, and then communicating and forecasting. You can look at these, they're just perfectly aligned to the fundamental process and framework of GIS itself. And the applications that came out of it were not just mapping the cases, but also exploring them so that we could get a handle on where the new hot spots were outbreaking, and then providing situation awareness to everyone from, for example, the military who are being affected. In our country, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, all of their projects were being affected by this outbreak. And in the beginning, we didn't know exactly how this was going to go, but it certainly impacted human activities. And then we integrated in something called EPI models, which are forecasting models. These kind of curves that everybody has been grown to understand. We're able to then, by integrating it into the GIS, we were able to integrate the growth curve and then see it on the map. So we could make a forecast and see where it was going. So then hospitals could prepare in advance. And then, of course, selecting the sites for testing, or selecting the sites for now vaccination systematically so that it was most accessible to all population, and include diversity and equity in that. Because in the beginning, there were different, in this country particularly, different races or different social groups that were left behind. Fortunately, a lot of that has been cleaned up. And then being able to do surveys. Okay, this is a lot of the description of what we're talking about, but it has resulted in a kind of community of collaboration. And so this whole vision I've been sharing about geospatial infrastructure, it was exemplified in this disease. And that's why, again, as I said before, the big challenges of climate change, let's just concentrate on that one. It's another, like a wave that's going to hit us. And we have to move fast on this. Most of you have heard the news on this. It's not new news. It's this sort of but there's no vaccine for it. We've got to really do, every ounce of energy into technology to be able, and science. These are big things that have to happen to get people to both understand and then react to, get carbon out of the energy system, to decarbonize our world, to defossilize. We are fossilized. That's what a good friend of mine from Germany said last week. We've built our whole economy, our prosperity on using fossil fuels. And all of us are enjoying even this communication of the great benefits of what energy from fossil fuels have given us. But we need to change really quickly, and we have just a couple of years to be able to make this transformation. So I see your work, everyone's work here, as critical in being able to address those challenges.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
These are, by the way, these are just a few examples of our users' work around the world. They're just dashboards of different types and so on. So I'll stop there. Sorry for going on.
No, that's fine. I think it's fascinating and listening, and it's a rare occasion to listen to more than 50 years of experience and passion in this discipline, GIS, Geoinformation System. I would like to take the next question, talking about the next generation. How should academic institutions prepare students for this geospatial revolution? There are so many jobs, but so many changes. And I'm also from academia, so I can maybe make it a little bit clearer. At university, we cannot make each updated, and we cannot have each product. And so what are you, as somebody who is really passionate, not narrowly for your products, but for the whole thing? As you said, we need to be on a mission. How can we bring students on this mission? How can, with the limited infrastructure of the universities?
Well, we support about 12,000 colleges and universities around the world with our tools. And they pay minor fees for it, except in developing countries where we have grant programs to enrich it. That's our reaction to it. We provide software tools, lots of MOOCs, training materials that can be built into curriculum. So historically, that started over 40 years ago in geography departments, and in some cases in forestry, or in some cases in social science activities. But it was never seen as a campus-wide activity. This year at the user conference, I'm giving an award to the University of Michigan, who actually has implemented GIS as a SaaS activity for their entire campus. And they have nearly 10,000 users in every department. So rather than making GIS a departmental thing, they've said, we want to have a spatial university. And they're trying to do this at Harvard. They're trying to do it at Santa Barbara, different universities around the world. So one idea is open up the power of spatial thinking. Maybe geography is too loaded as a disciplinary word, but spatial thinking and geographic science across every discipline. Then second, it has to be a technology discipline. So we have over 100 web classes that students can download the software free and learn on their own from MOOCs and training sessions. And then it also has to be a professional thing, just like surveying and cartography and mapping. There are practices, science practices. So there are degree programs in GIS, over 1,000 of them on the planet. So people come out of those degrees being a GIS professional, just like a professional surveyor or a professional mapper. And so some of that, I hope, addresses that question. This is not a technology thing, it's a professional thing. I think it has to be not just available to the specialists, but it also has more general purpose applicability across society. Look, everybody's learning how to make spreadsheets, right?
Yeah.
Almost every student, whether they're in economics or in math or whatever, they learn how to do spreadsheets. Why shouldn't they be able to learn how to make a map? And by the way, web mapping is as easy, maybe easier now with the automated tools, so everybody can make a map. You know, story maps are very popular. I didn't really show them, but almost 1 million story maps were published last year. That's basically a web map with a story around it, text, pictures, and so on. And billions of story maps get looked at every week. They tell stories about what's going on. You know, historic archaeologic sites, historic wars, historic patterns of disease, and, you know, future stories. So geojournalism, you know, Rudolf is another one of those geo things, right?
Yeah, that's fine.
Geojournalism, geoaccounting.
That's fine, that's fine. Just continue.
Yeah. So, so I think kids, I'm hoping that kids get as inspired as I got when I was in school, finding something. Yeah. And geography, I mean, digital geography, GIS tools are fantastic because they apply to virtually every industry. From, you know, every Starbucks store is using tools of GIS, every big department store, you know, airlines are using it, transportation companies are using it. So in the private sector, it's changing the world. In the public sector, it's changing how people do their actual work by seeing things spatially. I like to sometimes call it the geographic approach. That means holistic. It means collaborative. It means looking at all the different factors that need to be considered in creating a sustainable world. It's the geographic approach.
Okay, thank you very much. Another question, if you allow me.
Sure.
More and more people use GIS technology through services. However, systems providing the services seem to get more and more complex. How to bridge the gap in terms of capacity development to further developing these complex systems?
Well, did you know that the Apple iPhone is amazingly complex? It really is.
It is.
I mean, they don't expose it. Nobody understands it. But I mean, if you got the inside story from Steve when he was still alive, it was amazingly complex. But he engineered a pattern for making complexity simple. And that's really the big job of what we're doing today in the form of apps. I mean, these apps that create billions of maps every day, are relatively simple, and they're designed to be able to do complex things like integrative thinking simply. But there is enormous complexity behind them. And we are working on it, and our colleagues in other companies are working on it, trying to make servers, for example, more easy to set up. This year, we're about 2 weeks away from releasing all of our server technology on Kubernetes, which is a kind of operating system for clouds. It's called cloud native operating systems, and it will greatly simplify the ability to implement servers and stand them up and be able to make it scale out at immense amounts, because it is embracing some of the basic foundational cloud native technologies that all IT people actually are being challenged to be able to implement. So we're working on complexity, but we're also working on the reach, you know, through web maps and web apps and device apps that can reach it out.
Thank you. Can you tell us a little bit more about cloud computing, cloud capabilities? What will be the next step in this direction?
Well, not everybody knows. I don't know everything about it, but I'll simply say that the last 20 years have been a systematic evolution in the way people use cloud computing. And it started by just getting your software to run in the cloud, run in a cloud environment. And we did that with ArcGIS. And then it evolved into optimizing software in a cloud environment, taking advantage of some of the resources that cloud computing offers. And the last generation of this has been what people are referring to as cloud native software. This means it has been designed to be able to leverage all the scalability aspects of the cloud. They sometimes refer to this as cloud native. And that was really enabled by this new operating system called Kubernetes.
Yeah.
So in the first two cases, let's say Amazon or Microsoft or Google, they would say, you can run Windows in our cloud, or you can run Linux in our cloud. And people would take the software that was written on their normal computers and they'd put it in the cloud using Windows and Linux. And it was kind of cool. But when you put it on top of Kubernetes, it means it divides up the software into little microservices that can scale out on different machines all over the world or in very large cloud clusters. So that's one of the big trends, Rudolf, is that people are moving their software over to Kubernetes, and that is much easier to install, much easier to scale. It takes less DevOps resources to be able to manage. And for mapping agencies, that's really important, because how do you keep and acquire great people so you can begin to outsource some of your compute into these environments and manage them simply. On the other side, cloud architecture is an architecture that you can deploy inside of your own organization. And some big agencies have their own clouds. People like NGA, for example. And so they do everything in-house, a private cloud. And people like IBM have software that allows you to actually run and manage a cloud inside your own environment. And we support that. And then there's public clouds like the AWS and Microsoft's Azure that are really just way out there getting people to say, oh, why don't you use, well, in the beginning, nobody trusted that, putting your data or your applications in the cloud because of security. But very gradually, the security is getting better. In fact, I just read an article that most organizations' internal security is not as good as what you can now get in the cloud, just because you can't afford to hire 10 security officers to make sure it's really good. And then the last one, of course, is cost. And so I would say the cost of cloud computing just continues to drop, things like storage and so on. So how does all this relate to our field? Well, now in ArcGIS Online, which, by the way, is built on Azure and and Amazon together, we store imagery, all of Sentinel's imagery since its beginning, all of Landsat imagery since its beginning, in our country, NAPE imagery, MODIS imagery. So we store this stuff almost like on 7-track tape is what it costs us. So we store it all up in the cloud and make it available to all of our customers with image processing capability so that they can integrate it right into their app. That is cool. It means I don't have to host my imagery anymore or spend all the money on my own infrastructure. And what I mentioned a couple of minutes ago was this summer we're releasing this ability to take your imagery, put it into the cloud, and it just is managed up there. So I don't have to buy any software. I just use my imagery in that cloud, and you can do a couple hundred different imagery functions, raster analysis, AI, machine learning, all from the cloud. So I think organizations that are setting up their own infrastructure anymore for these massive amounts of data, especially in the imagery space, don't need to do it. So I've rambled on here a little bit about just touching on different aspects of my sense of what cloud really means. I think it's and then there's these hybrid situations. You have your own data in your own computer, but you bring in services from the cloud. And ArcGIS Online is mammoth. I mean, it has many terabytes of data in it. Global base maps, imagery, vector, geoprocessing. And people will have some of ArcGIS Online's layers coming in from a distributed cloud to complement and enhance their own applications and their own data sets. So I think I've covered the whole aspect of what I know.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Another question, what is a measurement technology which is fascinating you most? I mean, nowadays we have so many different technologies, satellites, GPS, GNSS, topography, imagery, all different types of sensors, IoT. So what type of measurement technology is fascinating you most is one of our questions.
Oh, they all do, actually. Their unification does, particularly for me, because you get this synergy out of bringing in. But look, I like very much the new generation of satellites that are synoptically providing measurement and more rapidly, like the Planet Labs, content that comes in very fast. Every few hours, I can get new pictures.
Yeah.
And that's stuff that used to belong only to the Intel organization. So it's not very spatially as accurate as something like digital globes or I guess it's Maxar these days, very precise, high quality imagery. But it gives us a temporal dimension. So in the remote sensing space, I like that. And the mixture of these things with AI and machine learning allows us to extract change analysis there. Another one that it may be challenging for you to think about is just device tracking of individuals. So I allow myself to be tracked by certain apps, and other ones I don't. But we implemented something called Tracker for our users so that their managers always know where they're at. And that's really powerful from a security perspective because, the world is full of challenges. And people can choose to turn themselves on or turn themselves off in terms of allowing their managers to know where they're at. And I find that's intriguing, particularly when you analyze it with big data environments.
Yeah.
There is a technology I didn't talk about, which is big data. The big cloud providers are allowing these data warehouses of content with lots of imagery or real-time information or transactional information, like all the financial transactions on a department store, all up in the cloud. And then being able to make queries against that to create interpretations of the information, I think will be important. Is that for national mapping agencies? Perhaps not, except in the imagery domain. But I think that intrigues me as a technology.
Thank you.
There is actually one other thing that is a software thing, which is unstructured data. With like text, you read a book, there's lots of georeferences inside of there, and there's now smart software which allows you to digitally read a book, pick up all the georeferences, put them as dots on a map. So we call it unstructured, georeferencing, unstructured georeferencing unstructured data, and then you see it on a map. So you can touch a dot on a map, and it brings up a chapter in a book.
Is this one of these geo AI applications, reading a book and extracting geodata?
No, it's just, well, you could think of it as geo AI, but really it's just logic and applications.
Okay, thank you. We talked about the next generation, and we talked about this recommendation for startup. But with your huge experience, professional experience, but also personal experience in life, what do you recommend to somebody who is today 18, 19, 20, how to enter the geo business, geospatial business, what to do in terms of education?
I'm not sure if you're aware of this, Rudolf, but we make all of our software available, all of RTS Online and its cloud resources available to every K through 12 school in the world. So we have thousands and thousands and thousands of schools that use RTS Online as a teaching method, starting at about the 6th grade, 10, 12-year-olds.
Yeah.
That's when spatial literacy starts to kick in. So I have the privilege of seeing some of these kids every once in a while. They used to come here in our auditorium and give presentations. That'll happen again next year. But it is amazing to see what a 15-year-old can do on their own, addressing issues in their community, whether they are issues of, one of my favorite schools is Roosevelt High School down here in Los Angeles. It's an inner city school, largely Hispanic, poor kids who, given the opportunity to play with technology, become amazing geoscientists. They see things like that are going on in their streets, and they come up with solutions to address them. So I like that idea, but it often requires a geo-mentor. And the reason why I'm, again, wanting to bring this up with the FIG members is adopt a school, adopt a teacher. Even if you just go into a classroom and talk about what it's like to be in FIG and your respective organizations. Yeah. Kids' eyes light up and they, wow, I could be a XYZ. So I guess as a 19-year-old, I'd just say, find something that you really love and go for it, whether it's playing music or getting into geo. But they usually have to have somebody that is a mentor. Somebody that just, I'm not talking about every day, I'm talking about just introducing what you do. For those organizations, invite a classroom into your organization, like a national mapping agency, let them take a tour. Let their eyes realize, what's potential in the work that you do. This is something I would recommend.
So create the passion, be a mentor is one of the things you do recommend. And once the passion is there, then the rest is coming?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think you create passion in anybody. The passion is in all of us. Yeah. Everybody wants to make a difference, frankly. Whether it's somebody going to the moon or somebody just fixing something in an automobile. Yeah. If they have a passion, and it's about discovering what the passion is or engaging them in such a way that the passion comes out. And I was lucky. I was not a brilliant student, but I just found this neat thing that I really loved, and it drove my life.
Yeah. So maybe revealing the passion is a better expression.
Yeah.
Oh, another provocative question is coming in. If you would run a national agency, what would you do first to get on the path to modernizing the GIS?
If I was a manager, I guess I would make sure that my people were literate in the technology. I would invest in them, send them back to university or get them training, get them engaged into it. Dallas Peck used to be the head of the U.S. Geological Survey, our national mapping agency. And during the 80s, I had the pleasure to meet with him. At that time, there was very little automation in their organization. Now it's totally changed. But he set up a little lab of about I think it was about 10 people inside of USGS. And he pulled people out of hydro, out of mapping, out of geology, out of biology, and he brought them into this lab. And it was a GIS lab. And he let them play. He called it play. They weren't playing. They were prototyping and learning. And then they would go back into their agencies and they transformed the different bureaus of the USGS. And that's how he actually transformed the organization. So he had this little highly acknowledged little lab. That's one way to do it. I don't know how else to do it, but it certainly made a big difference with him. The other thing I really want to encourage is that go beyond the mission, the traditional mission. Now technology allows you to not just do the mission better, like make a map, manage the system of record, but also the technology allows you to stand up a server and make the service, like the National Map Service, available to other agencies so they can mash up on a consistent national base map, forestry, water, demographics, and so on. So, and then I think as a leader, I would say stand up a portal in your country and develop good relations and friendships with the other agency heads so that you can create, a geospatial infrastructure, not from, spending a lot of money. If you're spending a lot of money, no, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just linking and integrating the content as services and organizing it in a portal and making it available to others. This requires leadership. It requires a little bit of resources, but really not a lot. So I think that's sort of sleeping. I saw it happen in Ireland really effectively, where just the National Mapping Agency head there just did a little, and it was really miraculous, the sort of spontaneity that happened. But I'm seeing it in other countries as well.
We're coming back to soccer. From, it's a difficult name in Dutch, Jeroen Utenbogart. He says, today I had the choice to either join this keynote session or watch the Dutch national team play in the European Championship. I definitely made the right choice. Jack is a true inspirator.
Thank you very much. We were talking about that all the Dutch people were going to go watch the soccer match, and so some of you will understand this, but I'd say if you chose soccer over FIG, it's vreselijk, which is a Dutch word that says, terrible or awful. So yeah, thank you very much for saying that.
Yeah, we are almost out of time. Is there a specific message you want to give to FIG and to our listeners spread all over the world in this specific times?
Well, I guess I'd close with the same thing I started with, which is each of you and your agencies are very special. I mean it really. You're very special and a special organization bringing all of this together because you are doing work that's foundational. How you chose your career, I don't know. But this is one of the most important careers, one of the most important fields for the future that I can think of, because you are building the foundation knowledge that will run the world. Your maps are already running the world. And keep that in mind as you do your work. I mean, you're building that infrastructure that will give us a chance to have a future. And ladies and gentlemen, it doesn't look so good, actually. But on the other hand, I'm a real positive-minded person. I think that we've stood up to tragedies and wars and famines and now, pandemics in the past. On the other hand, this one is really big. Stopping climate change, getting a handle on how to address our collective problems will require holistic thinking. It'll require collaboration among us, among you and your colleagues in your respective countries. and us as a global community. There's absolutely no room here for, polarization, not within our community. There's no room here for, equity biases or racism. There's no room here for non-scientific approaches. There's only room for, let's do it together. My colleagues in Japan have this term they call wari wari wa, and it really means us working together as a team. And I like that spirit. I've always loved that word. And I think this community really is so amazing to me. And it gives me hope, just like our users took the COVID templates and deployed them around the world so they were able to respond. Yeah. We can do the same thing with issues of livable cities, climate change, loss of biodiversity. But we have to, it's not just a technology thing. Yeah. It's not just about more measurement. Yeah. It's also about bringing the forces of geographic information together to do good.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jack. This was really inspirative and encouraging. And maybe you can just repeat this Japanese again, this wadi wadi wa. So let's work together, let's do it together. And I would like to thank you again and Esri for the support. And I would like to thank the audience listening to us. This was our last session today, but it will continue tomorrow morning. Have a look at the program. We have these different formats specifically adapted to this E-format, network, socialize yourself. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening and see you hopefully tomorrow. And thanks again.
Thanks again. Thanks, Rudolf.